Welcome everyone, let's dive right into this explainer where we're unpacking the mechanics of Windows Privilege Escalation. Privilege escalation isn't just one magic hack, it's really the systematic dismantling of boundaries to turn a standard everyday user into an absolute system administrator. Let's take a look at the architectural blueprint of how this actually happens.
To master this, we'll be moving through 6 quick stages. First, the Windows Identity Pyramid. Second, the Reconnaissance and Enumeration Grid. Third, exploiting structural misconfigurations. Fourth, the Privilege Exploit Matrix. Fifth, the anatomy of a breach. And finally, Stage 6, the Defender's Playbook.
All right, Stage 1, the Windows Identity Pyramid, understanding the foundation.
I want you to think of Windows access controls like a massive physical vault. Down at the very base, we have the foundation, which is the Security Account Manager, or a SAM database. This is essentially the encrypted basement holding local credentials and hashes. Moving up a level, we have SIDs, or Security Identifiers. Think of these as your immutable employee ID badges. And then, right at the top of the pyramid, we have access tokens, which act as the actual master keys to the kingdom.
Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding that those access tokens are the keys that run the show. Primary tokens represent a process's core security credentials. But impersonation tokens, well, that's where things get incredibly dangerous for defenders. They empower a server application to temporarily adopt a client's identity. So, if an attacker can manipulate or duplicate these tokens, they can bypass the entire identity pyramid in one fell swoop. No need to guess passwords.
Moving to Stage 2, Reconnaissance and Enumeration Grid, mapping the facility.
Once an attacker gets a basic foothold, they don't just start randomly kicking down doors, right? They map out the facility, and they usually use a dual approach. Automated tools like WinPEAS provide this massive, broad scope to spot misconfigurations across the entire system. But on the flip side, manual, stealthy commands like simply running whoami priv provide pinpoint accuracy to see what privileges your current token holds, and they do it without triggering the noisy alarms that automated scripts might set off.
Taking a closer look at that automated arsenal, each tool serves a very distinct purpose. WinPEAS is your go-to for immediate local system misconfigurations. BloodHound is a real game changer because it uses graph theory to map out highly complex, unintended Active Directory relationships. It reveals multi-hop escalation paths that are practically invisible to the human eye. Meanwhile, WES and G, the Windows Exploit Suggester, cross-references your exact system info against known missing OS patches.
All right, Stage 3, exploiting structural misconfigurations, finding the flaws.
Armed with that map, attackers look for configuration errors that practically hand over system access on a silver platter. Take the always install elevated registry policy, for example. It is almost comical, honestly. If administrators enable this, it literally lets standard users run MSI installers with full administrative rights. An attacker just wraps a malicious payload inside an MSI file and boom, they instantly bypass user account control.
Let's walk through the mechanics of another classic structural flaw, the unquoted service path. This is fascinating. Think about how a simple space in a file path without quotation marks totally tricks Windows. Because of how the operating system parses paths, it checks for executables sequentially at literally every space it encounters.
So, if you have a service path like c:/program files/vendor/binary.exe, but without quotes, the OS stops at the first space and looks for c:/program.exe. If a standard user happens to have write access to the C drive, they just drop a malicious payload and name it program.exe. The system happily executes it as system before it ever reaches the legitimate vendor binary. Literally, a simple typo by an admin equals a complete system compromise. No way, right? But it happens all the time.
Which brings us to Stage 4, the Privilege Exploit Matrix, stealing the master keys.
If the structural flaws aren't there, attackers go straight for the tokens. Specific token privileges are directly linked to specific exploit mechanics. Look at, say, impersonate privilege. It's meant to allow services to impersonate clients. But it is routinely weaponized for full system shell access using token theft via DCOM or NTLM reflection. Or, say, debug privilege, which allows you to bypass process boundaries entirely for memory injection. These right here are the specific tools of the trade you have to watch for. If an attacker has C impersonate, they are going to use print spoofer or juicy potato. If they have cdebug privilege, they'll combine procdump with mimikatz. They quietly pull a memory dump of the LSAS process, that's the Local Security Authority Subsystem Service, and then use mimikatz offline to parse out clear text credentials and password hashes.
It's honestly incredible to contrast the intended administrative purpose of these privileges against how attackers actually abuse them. For example, take ownership. It's supposed to let admins override permissions to take file ownership if something gets locked, but attackers? They use it to take ownership of critical system files like cmd.exe, alter the access control list, and execute whatever they want as system.
Okay, Stage 5, Anatomy of a Breach, the Outpost 24 case study.
Let's inject some urgency and see this in action. In this Outpost 24 case study, we get a masterclass in escalation. In step 1, the red team hits a brick wall. Strict app locker policies totally blocked PowerShell, but they adapted. They use native Windows binaries to query the credential manager. By step 4, they're fully living off the land, abusing a trusted built-in Microsoft SQL binary called SQLdumper.exe to quietly dump memory without triggering the EDR alarms. Ultimately, they extracted access tokens to hijack an Azure Active Directory sync node. They escalated from a single lockdown local machine all the way to a full cloud tenant takeover.
What this really proves is that privilege escalation isn't a straight line. It's a continuous 4-step loop: reconnaissance, identifying flaws, exploiting, and persisting. You do it over and over. It's the systematic, layered dismantling of interconnected architectural boundaries.
Which leads us to our final stage, the Defender's Playbook, securing the perimeter.
I absolutely love this insight from the sources because it fundamentally flips the script. Tools like WinPEAS, BloodHound, and WeSNG, they aren't just for the bad guys. They should be your primary defensive auditing tools. You have to find your own unquoted service paths and overprivileged accounts before the threat actors do.
To make escalation as difficult as possible, you have to implement these specific strategies. Deploy laps. It randomizes and rotates local admin passwords so attackers can't just pass the hash across your workstations. Use AppLocker with strict deny lists to block known bypass binaries. And above all else, enforce the principle of least privilege. Standard users should never, ever be sitting in the local administrators group.
True security isn't just buying one tool and calling it a day. It requires layering identity and access management, robust system hardening, and strict execution visibility. You need to actually monitor those event logs, specifically looking for the abnormal creation of name pipes or the deeply suspicious use of cdebug privilege by standard accounts.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a critical thought to evaluate against your own environments. Attackers are mapping your structural boundaries right now. Are you handing them the keys to the system? Take a hard look at your service paths, audit your access tokens, and run your own reconnaissance. Thank you so much for learning with us, and start securing your foundations today.